Emma Davis clutched her phone tightly as she navigated through the drizzling rain, her beat-up Honda Civic sputtering at each stoplight. The delivery app pinged again, her 12th order of the night. The clock on her dashboard read 10:47 p.m., and her body ached from the 14-hour shift. But she couldn't stop yet. Every dollar mattered when your 3-year-old son depended on you alone. Just 3 more deliveries, she whispered to herself, glancing at the photo of little Ollie taped to her dashboard. His smile, missing one front tooth, was the only thing keeping her going most nights, especially nights like these, when the rain made the roads slick and customers tipped poorly because their food arrived slightly soggy despite her best efforts. 6 months ago, Emma's life had been completely different. She had been a part-time graphic designer, working from their modest suburban home while caring for Ollie. Her husband, Derek, had managed a local electronics store. They weren't wealthy, but they were comfortable, until the day Emma came home from grocery shopping to find Derek's closet empty, his wedding ring on the kitchen counter, and a note that simply read, "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." No warning, no explanation, just gone. The following week, she discovered their joint account drained and credit cards maxed out. Derek had been gambling online for months. The debt collectors started calling 2 days later. Within weeks, Emma had been forced to sell their home, move into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in a part of town her mother would have called sketchy, and take any job she could find. Now she delivered food by day and designed logos by night, sleeping perhaps 4 hours between it all. The rain intensified as she pulled up to a towering apartment building in the wealthy part of downtown, Gloucester Towers, a place where the monthly parking fee probably cost more than her entire rent. "Penthouse delivery for Mr. Wilson," she muttered, reading the app instructions while trying to keep the paper bag of Thai food dry under her thin jacket. The doorman, an older gentleman with kind eyes, recognized her from previous deliveries. "Evening, miss. Another late night? Aren't they all, Frank?" Emma attempted a smile. "Penthouse again." Frank nodded sympathetically. "I'll let you up. Mr. Wilson's a good tipper, at least." The private elevator to the penthouse always made Emma uncomfortable. The polished brass and mirrors reflected her disheveled appearance. Hair frizzing from the rain, dark circles under her blue eyes, the delivery company's faded red uniform hanging loosely on her frame. She'd lost 15 pounds since Derek left, though not in the way women's magazines celebrated. The doors opened directly into an expansive foyer of marble and glass. Emma had delivered here enough times to know the routine: leave the food on the side table, ring the bell and go. Mr. Wilson, whoever he was, never answered in person. The receipt always included a generous tip automatically added through the app. Tonight, however, something was different. As she placed the food down, she heard a crash from somewhere inside the penthouse, followed by what sounded like a groan of pain. Emma hesitated. This wasn't her business. She should just leave. Another crash, louder this time. "Hello," she called out. "Mr. Wilson, your food delivery is here. Is everything okay?" Silence. Against her better judgment, Emma stepped further into the apartment. "Hello, do you need help?" She followed the sound into a vast living room with floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the rain-blurred city below. On the floor beside an overturned coffee table lay a man in his early 40s, clutching his chest and breathing heavily. "Oh my God!" Emma rushed forward, kneeling beside him. "Sir, are you all right? Should I call an ambulance?" The man shook his head vehemently, his face contorted in pain. "No, hospitals, just medication, bathroom, counter." Emma ran to where he pointed, finding an orange prescription bottle in the pristine marble bathroom. She filled a glass with water and hurried back, helping him sit up enough to take the pill. For several tense minutes, they sat in silence as his breathing gradually slowed. Emma noticed details about him she hadn't at first: his expensive but rumpled clothes, several days' worth of stubble, bloodshot eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept or showered in days. "Thank you," he finally said, voice hoarse. "You probably saved my life. What happened? Should I really not call someone?" "Heart condition, stress-induced arrhythmia. The medication controls it." He attempted to stand but swayed dangerously. Emma steadied him, surprised at how thin he felt beneath his designer shirt. "You should sit down properly. When's the last time you ate?" He looked genuinely confused by the question. "Tuesday, maybe." It's Friday night, Emma said, alarmed. Stay here. She retrieved the forgotten Thai food and opened the containers. As the aroma filled the room, the man's stomach growled audibly. You need to eat this. Slowly. She handed him a fork, watching as he took a small bite of pad thai. As he ate, Emma took in her surroundings. Despite the luxury apartment's magnificent views and expensive furniture, something felt off. There were no personal touches, no photos, books, or artwork that wasn't purely decorative. Empty liquor bottles lined the kitchen counter. Mail had piled up on a desk in the corner. I'm Emma, by the way, Emma Davis. The man looked up from his food. James Wilson. Well, James Wilson, you might want to consider hiring a housekeeper. The words slipped out before she could stop them. 6 months ago, she would never have spoken so boldly to a stranger, especially one who lived in a penthouse. To her surprise, he laughed, a rusty sound, as if unused for some time. You're right. Among other things. He gestured vaguely around him. This isn't exactly normal for me. Tough week? Tough year. His eyes, a striking grey that reminded Emma of the ocean during a storm, met hers. Why did you come in? Most delivery people would have just left. Emma shrugged. I heard something fall. You could have been hurt. Most people wouldn't care if I was. There was something in his voice, a profound loneliness that resonated with Emma. She recognized it from her own reflection. My shift ended 20 minutes ago, she said, checking her watch. Do you have someone coming to check on you, family, friends? James shook his head slightly. I've been isolating. Emma made a decision that surprised even herself. Look, I don't know you, and you don't know me, but you just had some kind of cardiac episode. Someone should make sure you don't have another one in the middle of the night. Are you offering to stay? His eyebrows rose. God, no. Emma laughed. That would be weird, but... She hesitated, an idea forming. I have a couch. It's not fancy, but it's clean. My son is at my mother's for the weekend. You could crash there, and I'll know you're not dying on your expensive rug. You're inviting a strange man to your home. You're in no condition to be dangerous, Emma pointed out practically. And frankly, you look like you could use a break from... She gestured around the beautiful but somehow sterile apartment. Whatever this is. James stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Emma's astonishment, he nodded. Okay. Okay? Emma hadn't actually expected him to agree. On one condition, James said, attempting to straighten his posture. You let me pay you for your time. Emma's pride flared. I'm not a nurse for hire. No, he corrected quickly, for saving me from another night here. Please. Something in his eyes, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with the wealth surrounding them, made Emma nod. Fine, but we're taking your food with us, and you need to grab whatever medications you need. As James slowly gathered his things, Emma texted her mother to check on Ollie. What was she doing inviting a stranger home? But as she watched James move around his vast empty apartment like a ghost, she recognized something in him that she understood all too well. Sometimes the loneliest places were the ones filled with the most things. The drive to Emma's apartment was silent, except for the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers battling the persistent rain. James sat in the passenger seat of her Honda Civic, looking oddly out of place despite his disheveled appearance. His single overnight bag contained what Emma assumed were essentials: medication, a toothbrush, and a change of clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Turn left here, Emma instructed as they approached her neighborhood. A far cry from the gleaming downtown towers, this area featured weathered apartment buildings and family-owned businesses with signs in multiple languages. It's not exactly Gloucester Towers. It's real, James said quietly, looking out the window with unexpected interest. People actually live here. Emma glanced at him, trying to decipher if he was being condescending, but his expression showed genuine curiosity. As opposed to? As opposed to existing in climate-controlled bubbles where everything is curated and nothing is authentic. The bitterness in his voice surprised her. They pulled into the small parking lot behind her building. The 4-story brick structure had seen better days, but the security doors worked and the hallways were clean. The main reasons Emma had chosen it despite the tight budget. "Third floor," she explained as they climbed the stairs, James moving slowly but steadily. "Elevator's been out for maintenance since I moved in." Her apartment was exactly 847 square feet. She knew because the landlord had emphasized the generous size when showing it to her. The living room connected to a small kitchen, with a short hallway leading to a bathroom and single bedroom, currently decorated with dinosaur decals and a toddler bed. "Make yourself comfortable," Emma said, gesturing to the couch while setting down her keys and shrugging off her wet jacket. "There's not much, but it's home." James stood in the center of the room, taking in the mismatched furniture, clearly second-hand but arranged with care. Children's toys were neatly organized in colorful bins. Family photos lined the walls, mostly of Emma, and a small boy with her same bright smile and curious eyes. "It's perfect," he said with such sincerity that Emma paused while hanging up her jacket. "You must have hit your head when you fell," she joked, suddenly self-conscious about the water stain on the ceiling and the worn carpet beneath their feet. James walked over to the bookshelf, examining the framed photos. "Your son, Oliver. Ollie. He's 3. Emma moved to the kitchen, putting on a kettle for tea. "He's staying with my mother this weekend so I could pick up extra shifts." "You work multiple jobs?" "Delivery during the day, freelance graphic design at night when I can keep my eyes open." She shrugged. "Single parenthood isn't for the faint of heart." "His father?" Emma's expression hardened slightly. "Not in the picture. Tea?" James accepted the change of subject gracefully. "Please." While the water boiled, Emma showed him the bathroom, supplied a clean towel, and made up the couch with sheets and a pillow. The domestic routine felt strangely normal, despite the unusual circumstances. "The hot water can be temperamental," she warned, as James prepared to shower. "If it starts going cold, turn it off for 10 seconds, then back on." Alone in the kitchen, Emma found herself wondering what on earth she was doing. She'd brought a stranger, a clearly wealthy stranger with health problems, into her home on impulse. It wasn't like her to be so spontaneous, not since Ollie was born, not since Derek left. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother, attaching a photo of Ollie sleeping, clutching his favorite dinosaur plushie. The sight centering her, reminding her why she worked those long hours and made the sacrifices she did. When James emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, he looked transformed. Clean-shaven, hair still damp, wearing what appeared to be silk pajamas. He seemed younger, though the dark circles under his eyes remained. "Feel better?" Emma asked, handing him a mug of tea. "Like a new man," he admitted, accepting the tea gratefully. "Thank you for this, all of this." They settled on opposite ends of the couch, a companionable silence falling between them. "So," Emma finally said, curiosity getting the better of her, "what exactly does James Wilson do when he's not collapsing in penthouses?" James stared into his tea for a long moment. "Would you believe me if I said I run a company? With that watch?" "Yes." Emma nodded toward his wrist, where an elegant timepiece peeked from beneath his sleeve. "Even I know Patek Philippe isn't something you buy at the mall." He smiled faintly. "Wilson Innovations. We develop sustainable technology solutions." Emma nearly choked on her tea. "Wait, Wilson Innovations, the company that's been revolutionizing solar energy storage? You've heard of us?" James seemed surprised. "I did the graphic design for a small environmental non-profit last year. Your company's battery technology was all they could talk about." Emma studied him with new interest. "So you're what, an executive there?" James hesitated. "I'm the CEO. I founded the company 12 years ago." Emma set down her mug slowly. "You're James Wilson. The James Wilson. Guilty. And you're on my couch, drinking Lipton tea from my chipped Disneyland mug." "It's the best tea I've had in months," he said with unexpected humor. Emma leaned back, processing this information. "So, what was happening at your apartment? Why were you alone if you're—" She gestured vaguely. "You know, you?" The hint of a smile faded from James's face. "That's a longer story." "I've got time," Emma said, pulling her legs up beneath her. "Unless you'd rather sleep." James ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed unconscious. "The short version? I'm in the middle of an attempted hostile takeover of my company by my board of directors, led by my former best friend and COO. 3 months ago, they voted to remove me from day-to-day operations, claiming my erratic behavior and concerning decisions were damaging the company. Were they? Erratic, I mean. I wanted to make our newest battery technology open source." His voice took on passionate intensity. "Do you know what that would mean? Accessible clean energy storage for developing countries, a real chance to combat climate change on a global scale. But the board saw dollar signs disappearing, profits over people." Emma studied him. "That sounds noble. but also like financial suicide for a tech company. We'd still hold patents on the manufacturing processes, still be the industry leaders. But my so-called friend Marcus convinced the board I was having some kind of breakdown. James's hands tightened around the mug. Maybe he was right. What do you mean? After they sidelined me, He searched for words. I didn't handle it well. Started missing meetings, then stopped going in altogether. My assistant quit when I wouldn't return her calls for 2 weeks. Hence the state of your apartment, Emma observed. Hence the state of everything. James set down his mug. The final shareholder vote is in 2 weeks. If I don't present a compelling case at the emergency board meeting next Friday, I lose everything I've built. Can they really push you out of your own company? I only hold 40% of the shares now. The rest went to investors as we grew. His voice grew quieter, including 15% to Marcus, my so-called best friend since college. Emma felt a pang of empathy, recognizing the betrayal in his voice. That explains the heart issues. The arrhythmia is a pre-existing condition, but stress makes it worse, James acknowledged. The isolation probably didn't help. Why not fight back? Surely you have resources, connections. I do, or did. James laughed hollowly. But when you've been working 20-hour days for over a decade, you don't maintain many real friendships. Everyone wants something from the billionaire CEO. Is that what you are? A billionaire? Emma asked, unable to keep the astonishment from her voice. On paper. Most of it's tied to company stock. If I lose control, you lose everything, Emma finished. A silence fell between them. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind the occasional sound of tires on wet pavement. Your turn, James said finally, eyes meeting hers. What's your story? How'd you end up delivering food to penthouses? Emma hesitated. Her story felt small compared to corporate takeovers and billions of dollars, but the genuine interest in James's expression encouraged her. My ex-husband emptied our accounts and disappeared 6 months ago, she said with practiced neutrality. Turns out he had a gambling problem I knew nothing about, left me with a 3-year-old, no savings, and a mountain of debt. He just left. No warning. A note on the counter. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Emma shrugged, the memory still painful despite her casual tone. 7 years together and that's all I got. James shook his head. I'm sorry. I had to sell our house to cover the debts he left behind. My design business wasn't enough to support us, so I started delivering. It's not the life I imagined, but we're surviving. Emma's gaze drifted to Ollie's toys. He's happy. That's what matters. Kids are resilient. And their mothers, James asked softly. Emma smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We do what we have to do. For a moment they sat in silence, two strangers connected by nothing more than circumstance and shared understanding of loss. Different kinds of loss, but loss nonetheless. We should probably get some sleep, Emma said finally, noting the time. I have an early shift tomorrow. On Saturday? Bills don't take weekends off, she said lightly, standing to take their mugs to the kitchen. As Emma prepared for bed, she heard James settling on the couch. The events of the evening felt surreal. A billionaire CEO was sleeping in her living room, a billionaire who'd been betrayed and might lose everything, just as her world had been upended months ago. She wondered what tomorrow would bring, unaware that inviting James Wilson into her home would change both their lives in ways neither could possibly imagine. Emma woke to the unusual aroma of fresh coffee and something deliciously buttery. For one disorienting moment, she thought she was back in her old house before everything fell apart. Then reality rushed back as she remembered her unexpected houseguest. Pulling on a robe, she padded into the kitchen to find James busy at her small stove, deftly flipping what appeared to be perfect French toast. The countertop held fresh berries, orange juice and a loaf of bread that definitely hadn't been in her nearly empty refrigerator yesterday. You went shopping? Emma asked, smoothing her hair self-consciously. James turned, spatula in hand, looking surprisingly at ease in her tiny kitchen. Hope you don't mind. I woke up early and wanted to thank you for last night. By breaking into my empty fridge? There's a convenience store on the corner. I took the liberty. He slid a piece of French toast onto a plate. Coffee? Emma accepted the steaming mug, the rich aroma confirming this wasn't her usual store-brand grounds. You didn't have to do this. I haven't cooked for anyone in years, James admitted, his expression softer than last night. It's nice, actually. They ate at her small table by the window, morning sunlight replacing yesterday's rain. Emma studied James in the daylight. He looked better, rested, his expensive clothes incongruous against her worn furniture, but his posture more relaxed. "What's your plan today?" Emma asked, savoring the best breakfast she'd had in months. "I should probably head back to the penthouse," James said, though he didn't sound enthusiastic. "Try to sort through some paperwork before Monday's preliminary board meeting." Emma nodded, surprised at her own disappointment. Of course he would go back to his real life. Last night had been an anomaly, a strange intersection of their very different worlds. "What about you?" James asked. "Delivery shift starts at 11. Then I need to pick up Ollie from my mom's." She took another sip of coffee. Back to reality. James seemed about to say something when Emma's phone rang. Her mother's number flashed on the screen. "Mom? Everything okay with Ollie?" Emma's brow furrowed as she listened. "Fever? How high?" She rose from the table, grabbing a notepad. "Yes, I'll get the medicine. I'll be there as soon as I can." She hung up, already moving toward her bedroom. "I need to cancel my shift. Ollie's sick. 102-degree fever." "Is it serious?" James asked, concern evident in his voice. "Probably just a virus, but I need to get him home." Emma was already changing clothes, calling out from her bedroom. "I'm so sorry to cut this short, but I need to—" "Let me drive you," James interrupted. Emma paused in the doorway, half-dressed. "What? My driver can take us. It'll be faster than public transportation." His tone was matter-of-fact. "We can stop for the medicine on the way." Emma wanted to refuse, to maintain her hard-won independence, but practicality won out. Every minute mattered when Ollie was sick. "Okay," she said finally, "thank you." 30 minutes later, they were in the back seat of a sleek black car that had appeared within minutes of James's call. The driver, a professional-looking woman named Diane, navigated through weekend traffic with calm efficiency while Emma fidgeted beside James. "He'll be okay," James said gently. "Kids get fevers." "I know. It's just—" Emma sighed. "When it's just you, every little thing feels like a crisis. There's no one to share the worry." They stopped at a pharmacy, where James insisted on going in himself, returning with not just the children's Tylenol Emma had requested, but also a stuffed dinosaur, a puzzle, and several picture books. "What's all this?" Emma asked, bewildered. "Sick day supplies," James said, looking slightly embarrassed. "My mother used to bring me new books when I was sick, made it less awful somehow." The unexpected glimpse into his childhood touched Emma more than she wanted to admit. At her mother's modest suburban home, James waited in the car while Emma ran inside. She emerged 20 minutes later, carrying a flushed, clingy Ollie wrapped in his dinosaur blanket. Her mother followed, carrying Ollie's small backpack and looking curiously at the luxury vehicle. "This is my friend James," Emma explained as she settled Ollie into the car. "He's giving us a ride home." "Friend, huh?" her mother whispered, with raised eyebrows before turning to James with a warm smile. "Thank you for helping them. I'd drive, but my car's in the shop." "It's no trouble," James replied, his attention on Ollie, who was regarding him with feverish curiosity. "You're tall," the little boy observed hoarsely. "You're observant," James replied seriously, earning a small smile from Ollie despite his discomfort. The drive back to Emma's apartment was filled with Ollie's occasional whimpers and Emma's soft reassurances. James sat quietly, occasionally passing back tissues or water, his eyes revealing a surprising tenderness whenever they fell on the sick child. Once home, Emma focused entirely on Ollie, measuring medicine, setting up his favorite cartoons, and applying a cool cloth to his forehead. James moved around them efficiently, unpacking the pharmacy supplies and making tea without being asked. The hours passed in a blur. Ollie's fever spiked despite the medication, bringing tears and discomfort. Emma held him on the couch, singing softly as he dozed fitfully against her chest. She had almost forgotten James was still there, until she looked up to find him watching them, an unreadable expression on his face. "You don't have to stay," she whispered over Ollie's head. "I'm sure you have important things to do." "Nothing more important than this," he replied simply, passing her a fresh, cool cloth for Ollie's forehead. As evening approached, Ollie's fever finally broke. His breathing eased, and his little body relaxed into deeper sleep. Emma carefully transferred him to his bed, leaving the door ajar. She returned to the living room to find James at her laptop, brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you doing?" she asked, suspicious despite everything. James looked up, seeming almost guilty. I hope you don't mind. I was looking at your portfolio, the graphic design work on your desktop. It's exceptional. Emma flushed with unexpected pleasure. It's just freelance work, small projects mostly. This campaign for the environmental non-profit Green Future Initiative, it's brilliant. The way you've visualized complex data while maintaining emotional impact. James turned the screen toward her. This is professional grade work. Try telling that to potential clients, Emma said with a wry smile. Without agency experience, most won't even look at my portfolio. James studied her for a moment. What would you say if I offered you a job? Emma stared at him. Excuse me. Wilson Innovations needs a new creative director for our public communications division. The previous one left with Marcus's faction. James's eyes were intense. Based on this portfolio, you're more qualified than half the agencies we've interviewed. You can't be serious, Emma said, sinking onto the couch. You barely know me. I know enough, James countered. I know you're talented, resourceful, and dedicated. I know you have an innate understanding of how to communicate complex ideas visually, and I know you deserve better than delivering food to ungrateful customers. Emma shook her head, overwhelmed. This is crazy. You're offering me a job because I let you sleep on my couch. I'm offering you a job because you're qualified, James corrected firmly. The salary would be 6 figures, with full benefits and flexible hours so you can be there for Ollie. 6 figures, Emma repeated faintly. The amount was life-changing. Enough to pay off Derek's remaining debts, enough for a proper home for Ollie, enough to breathe again. There's one complicated factor, James admitted, his expression shifting. I might not have a company in 2 weeks if the board vote goes against me. Reality crashed back. Of course there was a catch. So this isn't really a job offer, Emma said, disappointment sharp. It's contingent on you winning your battle. Yes and no. James leaned forward. If I win, the job is yours, no question. But even if I lose control, I need someone to help me with my next venture. I'm not staying down, Emma, no matter what happens at that vote. The intensity in his voice was compelling. Emma could almost believe him. Why me? She asked finally. There must be thousands of qualified designers who'd jump at the chance. Because I trust you, James said simply. And right now, that's in short supply in my life. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Emma was about to respond when her phone buzzed with a text. Her face paled as she read it. What's wrong? James asked immediately. It's from my landlord. Emma's voice shook slightly. They're selling the building. All tenants have 30 days to vacate. Can they do that? Apparently there's a clause in my lease. Emma pressed a hand to her forehead. Perfect timing. James was quiet for a moment. Move in with me. Emma's head snapped up. What? Not like that, he clarified quickly. My penthouse has 3 bedrooms. You and Ollie could have your own space while you figure things out. No rent, no obligations. James, I can't. Why not? You need a place to stay. I need. He paused, seeming to search for words. I need to remember why I built my company in the first place. To help people, not just accumulate wealth. People would talk, Emma said weakly, already knowing it was a flimsy objection. Let them, James replied with unexpected fierceness. For once in my life, I don't care what anyone thinks. Before Emma could respond, a small voice called from the bedroom. Mommy, my tummy hurts. The sound of Ollie retching followed immediately. Emma rushed to help her son, leaving James and his impossible offer hanging in the air between them. As she comforted Ollie through another round of sickness, Emma's mind raced with possibilities. Move into a billionaire's penthouse. Accept a job from a man she'd known for barely 24 hours. It was madness. And yet, as she glanced over her shoulder to see James in the doorway, holding a fresh glass of water and looking at Ollie with genuine concern, Emma wondered if sometimes madness was exactly what a broken life needed. What neither of them could possibly know was that someone else was very interested in their budding connection, someone who would stop at nothing to ensure James Wilson lost everything, including his newfound friendship with a delivery driver and her sick little boy. 3 days later, Emma stood in the doorway of Ollie's new bedroom in James's penthouse, watching her son sleep peacefully surrounded by more luxury than she'd ever imagined. The spacious room had been hastily but thoughtfully transformed, with dinosaur-themed bedding and nightlights. James had ordered the moment they'd agreed to his offer. The decision to accept had come after hours of deliberation and one more night of caring for Ollie together. Something about the way James had rolled up his sleeves to help clean up after a particularly messy episode of sickness, without a hint of disgust or hesitation, had tipped the scales for Emma. Billionaire or not, he was simply a good man. "He's finally sleeping through the night," James observed quietly, appearing beside her with 2 mugs of tea. Emma accepted one gratefully. "The pediatrician says the virus is almost out of his system." They moved to the living room, now transformed from its previous sterile emptiness. Emma's mismatched throw pillows brightened the designer sofa. Ollie's toys occupied a corner. Family photos, Emma had insisted on bringing them, lined a previously bare shelf. "Tomorrow's the board meeting," Emma said, studying James's face. In the past 3 days, he'd spent hours in his home office preparing, emerging occasionally to check on Ollie or share meals with them. "Everything's ready." James's expression was calm but determined. "My presentation is solid. I've spoken with every board member who would take my call." "How many?" 4 out of 11. He smiled wryly. "Not exactly a majority." "But your plan is brilliant," Emma insisted, having helped refine the visuals for his presentation. "The open-source platform alongside the premium manufacturing services, it's commercially viable and true to your original vision." "Maybe." James set down his mug. "But Marcus has had months to poison the well. The shareholders are afraid. When people are afraid, they make decisions based on fear, not reason." Emma touched his arm lightly. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already won something important." "What's that?" "You remembered why you started Wilson Innovations in the first place. Not for profit, but for purpose." James covered her hand with his own. "Thank you for reminding me of that." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings that had been building since that first rainy night. "I should get some sleep," Emma said finally, withdrawing her hand reluctantly. "Big day tomorrow." "Emma," James called as she turned to leave, "no matter what happens at the vote, whether I lose the company or not, I'm glad I found you. You and Ollie." "So am I," she replied softly before disappearing into the guest suite. The Wilson Innovations headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming tower downtown. Emma, dressed in a borrowed suit from James's personal shopper, sat in the back of the boardroom while shareholders and board members filed in. James stood at the front, projecting confident composure despite the tension visible in his shoulders. Marcus Chen entered last, surrounded by advisors. He was younger than Emma had expected, handsome and sharply dressed. His eyes widened slightly when he noticed her before he whispered something to the man beside him. "Who is she?" Emma heard someone murmur. "Wilson's new girlfriend, apparently," came the reply. "He's been seen with her and some kid, trying to rehab his image before the vote." Emma flushed, but kept her expression neutral. She and James had expected gossip. The meeting began with Marcus presenting his case for removing James permanently. His arguments were compelling, charts showing stock fluctuations that coincided with James's erratic behavior, testimonials from concerned employees, projections showing devastating losses if the open-source plan proceeded. When James's turn came, he approached the podium with quiet dignity. Instead of beginning with numbers or rebuttals, he told a story about founding Wilson Innovations in a garage with a vision of making sustainable energy accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. "Somewhere along the way," he admitted, "I lost sight of that vision. I became focused on expansion, on acquisitions, on quarterly earnings, but recent events forced me to reevaluate everything." His eyes found Emma's briefly. What Marcus and others have labeled as erratic behavior was actually clarity returning. "My proposal is not a rejection of profit. It's a recommitment to purpose." James launched into his presentation, the one Emma had helped design. The slides showed how open-sourcing the battery technology would position Wilson Innovations as the industry leader while expanding sustainable energy access globally. The numbers projected slower but steadier growth, sustainable in every sense of the word. When he finished, silence filled the room. Then a retired engineer who had been with the company from the beginning stood up. "I joined Wilson Innovations because of James's vision. I'm voting to keep him as CEO." One by one, other shareholders spoke up. Not all supported James, but more than expected expressed concerns about Marcus's profit-first approach. The final vote was scheduled for after lunch. As the room emptied, Marcus approached Emma, his smile not reaching his eyes. "You must be the famous Emma," he said smoothly. Clever of James to find such a compelling prop family. "Excuse me?" Emma's voice was ice. The struggling single mother and cute kid. Perfect optics. Marcus chuckled, though I doubt it'll be enough to save him. Before Emma could respond, James appeared at her side. Everything okay here? Just meeting your latest investment, Marcus said with a smirk, before walking away. The vote was 6-5 in James's favor. One board member had switched sides at the last minute, citing the engineer's endorsement as her reason. As they drove home, James was quiet, processing the narrow victory. What happens now? Emma asked. We rebuild. The company. My life. James turned to her. If you're still interested in that creative director position? Emma smiled. I think I could be persuaded. And the living arrangement? She thought of Ollie, who had blossomed in the 3 days at the penthouse, and of the warmth that had grown between her and James. Let's take it one day at a time, she said, reaching for his hand. We've both been broken, but maybe that's how the light gets in. James's fingers interlaced with hers. I'd like that very much. As the car carried them home through the city streets, Emma reflected on how a simple act of kindness on a rainy night had changed everything. Sometimes second chances appeared in the most unexpected places.